Hey everyone, welcome back to the second part in the bookstore project series of videos. In the first part, we have set up the bookstore database using the Entity Framework's code first approach. We have also created the books API controller to fetch the list of the books depending on the page number, which is being supplied as an argument to this web API method. We also created or set up the initial bootstrap grid for the books list and for the cards div, and we have also created the books template for the handlebars, which will eventually be compiled and will use the data source to generate HTML element for each of the individual book items. Now it's time to load the books depending on the page number. So the first thing that we will do is to create a script element. Inside this script element, first we need to fetch the reference of this template, and that can be done by calling the document.querySelector and then providing the ID of this script template, which is book template. Let's also have a variable for the page number, which is initially set as 0. We will also create a load method, which will be called when the entire page content has been loaded. So first let's create the load function. But we will not do anything for this function right now. First, we will create the function to fetch the results of books and later on the result of cart items. For that, first we will create an async function which will use the RxJS observables to spit out the result of the books which have been fetched from the server. So async function, and then let's just call it get fetch observable, and this function is going to accept the URL of the web API. So first let's get the response. So let response equals to await and then fetch the URL which has been provided as an argument. And now let's get the JSON from this response. So await response.json. Now we have to return a new RxJS observable, but we have skipped a very important step, and that is to load the scripts of RxJS library and also of Handlebars library. Those libraries can be loaded by first opening up the layout.cs HTML, and then we can load these libraries using their CDN links. So we need to go to the environment, include development, because we will be running this application in the development mode, and then we will provide the CDN script references for handlebars and for RxJS, and that should be enough to load the scripts. Now let's get back to the get fetch observable function, and the spelling is also not correct. Let's just fix it. Now we need to return a new observable using the RxJS library, and that can be done by calling rxjs.observable.create, and then we will have the observer as an argument. So fetch observer, this is an arrow function, so we will call fetch observer dot next, and then we will return the JSON from above, and there is nothing else to return, so we will simply call fetch observer dot complete. And that should be pretty much it for using and returning the observable. Now the observable returned from this function can be used for both books and cart items. So first let's create the function to fetch the or to load the books, and that can be done by creating the function in an async mode. Let's just call it load books. First we will fetch the div books reference, in which we need to append the newly created or generated book items using the handlebars template. Next, we will compile the template by using the contents which are inside this book source. So we just need to call handlebars.compile, and then we need to provide the contents of this template that we need to compile. Now it's time to create and use the observable to fetch the list of books. So let observable equals to await get fetch observable, and then we need to provide the URL. Now the URL is API and then books, and then we need to provide the page number. So let's just do that, because we need to provide this page number as an argument for this get method for the HTTP GET. Let's now subscribe to this observable, and this can be done by calling observable dot subscribe, and we can provide an arrow function as an argument over here. So the data is going to be this JSON, which will be the return value when this fetch observer.next will be called for this function. So data and then an arrow function. Now we will need to use this data. What we will do is we will create a new observable from this array, because the API books is going to return a list or a collection of books. So we can create another observable by using that array. So let array source equals to RxJS dot from, and then we need to provide the data as an argument, and then we will subscribe to this array source. So array source dot subscribe. Now this array source observable is going to spit out the array items one by one until there are no items left. So for each book item, we are going to create a new book element from the handlebars template, and then we will keep on appending it to the div books. So let's just do that. Alright, so this can be done by simply appending to the $div books by calling the jQuery's append function, and then we can create a new element. So this element will be having the HTML of the template, so template, and then we can provide the book model as an argument, and that should be pretty much it. Now it's time to get back to the load function and provide the code or feature for the infinite loading. So what we will do is we will use the intersection observer API to check when this div loader is visible in the browser's viewport. You can check out what intersection observer API is by watching the video, which I have linked in the description of this video. Essentially what we need to do is we need to create a new observer object by calling the intersection observer constructor. We need to provide the callback function and the options. The options is an object which specifies the root element which needs to be used. Right now it is null. This means that the browser is going to be the root element. We will provide the root margin around the root element, and we will provide the threshold or the percentage by which when this element will become visible, then we will know that it has indeed become visible in the viewport of this root element. Let's create the callback function, and this can be done by creating a new arrow function, and this is going to accept two arguments: the list of entries which we are observing and the observer object itself. So let's just do that. Now we are going to iterate over this entries collection, and when any of the entry is intersecting, then we will load the new books by incrementing the page number. So entries dot for each and entry, and this is an arrow function. So if entry dot is intersecting, then what we will do is we will increment the page number, and we will call load books function, which is eventually going to use this updated page number. The last thing that we need to do is to start observing this div loader element, and that can be done by calling observer.observe and then providing the reference of this div loader. Now let's run the code to see if the list of the books is being loaded or not. So the spinner is spinning and nothing is happening. Let's see what's wrong over here. So fetch is not defined. I have a typo over here. Let's just fix this typo. So this is going to be fetch. Let's reload the page again. After refreshing the page, there seems to be another error over here, and it says that cannot read property subscribe of undefined. It looks like that this observer is undefined. Let's just check this one. So yeah, observable is undefined. So we have not returned this observable. This could be the reason. Let's refresh the page again. So there is another error over here, and it looks like another typo, and I guess I can never get this fetch spelling right. So let's check again. Alright, so now books are being loaded but not their images. It looks like there is something wrong in their path. And let's check the URL. I guess we need to remove this one from over here. I don't know why this got added automatically. Maybe I was not paying attention. Let's check again and let's refresh the page. So now the books are being loaded, and now let's check if the infinite scroll is working or not. And yes, it is working. So now the books have been listed, and now it's time to create the cart widget. To create the cart widget, first we need to apply the session to this application, and for that we need to open up the startup.cs file. We need to provide code to add session to the application, and the idle timeout of the session is 10 minutes. And we also need to add another line of code over here, app.useSession, and that should be pretty much it to add the session. Now we need to add a helper method for adding custom objects to the session object of this application. So let's just add a new folder, and I'm going to name it as helper. Add a new class into it. Name this class as session helper. So session helper.cs. Let's just call this class as session extensions because this is going to be an extension method class, and I'm going to add two methods to it. The first one will be to add an object to the session, and the second one will be to get an object from the session. Also, because these methods are static, we need to declare this class as static too. So static class session extensions. And we also need to include the namespaces for using the JSON convert class. So using newtonsoft.json, and let's also include another namespace. So using microsoft.aspnetcore.http. Alright, so the extension method class has been created, and now it's time to create the API controller for the cart items. For that, go to the API folder under the controllers folder and add a new controller class, the API controller with empty read write actions. Click on add, and let's just name it as cart controller. We need to provide implementations for the get, post and delete methods, but first let's create the model for an individual cart item. This can be done by going to the models folder and adding a new class to it. Let's just call it cart item. So cart item.cs. I'm going to add 4 properties to it. The first one is going to be ID, which will be same as the ID of the book. The second one will be the name of the book. Third one will be the price depending on the quantity, and the fourth one is the quantity of the books which have been added to the cart. Now let's get back to the cart controller and include the namespace for the models. So using bookstoreapp.models. This get function is going to return the list of the cart items. So let's provide the value of cart item over here, and I'm going to remove this one. Let's first fetch the list of cart items. So list of cart items equals to http context.session, and we need to call the helper extension method which we created, but to do that first we need to include its namespace. So using bookstoreapp.helper, and now we will be able to use that extension method. So get object from JSON, and the type is list of cart item, and the key is going to be cart items. So if the list of cart items is null, then we will create a new one and add it to the session. Otherwise we will return this fetched list. So if cart items is null, then we will initialize this cart items as a new list, and then we will add it to the session object by calling the set object as JSON extension method. We will provide the key value, and we will provide this object, this list, as the object that we need to add to the session. And then finally let's just return this list of cart items. So the get method has been finished and now it's time to write code for the post method. I'm going to remove this get method with a single argument because we are not going to need that. For HTTP post, the argument is going to be of the type cart item. So let's just have the correct argument type. Now two things will happen in this HTTP post method. If the cart item which has been provided as an argument is not there in the session, then it will be added to it. Otherwise, if it is already there, then we simply need to increment its quantity by 1. We will also need to check if the cart items already exist or not in the session. So first let's fetch the list of the cart items. And like above, if the cart items list is null, then we will create a new list and we will set it as an object into the session associating with the key cart items. Now let's check if the cart item already exists in the session or not by using its ID, because we can search using its ID if it is already there in the list or not. So if the existing cart item is null, then we can add a new one to the session. So let's just add to the cart items dot add, and then let's add the cart item which has been provided as an argument. Otherwise, if it is not null and if it already exists in the session, then we simply have to increase its quantity. So existing item dot quantity plus equals to the quantity which is being supplied from the browser. So cart item dot quantity. And we also need to update the price depending on the quantity. So existing item dot price equals to cart item dot price multiplied by existing item dot quantity, because the quantity has already been updated up there. And now because we have made changes to this object, we again need to resave it to the session, and that can be done by simply calling http context.session.set object as JSON extension method and then providing the key cart items along with the list of cart items. The final method implementation that we need to provide is for the delete method, and over here first we will fetch the list of cart items. If it is not null, then we will remove the cart item having the ID which has been provided as an argument, and we will ultimately update the cart item object in the session, and we can safely remove this put method too. So the API controller for the cart items have been finished, and now it's time to get back to the index.cs HTML file and implement the cart widget which will display on the right side as a fixed element. For that we can add a div and we can style it using the class, and let's just call the class as cartDiv. Let's provide the classes implementation detail over here in the site.css file. And now we can add a new h3, and let's just write cart over here, and let's create a new div which will act as a container for all of the individual cart items. So let's set the ID as div cart items, and now we need to create the handlebars template for all of the cart items. So let's just create a new script element with the ID as cart item template, and let's set the type as, it's going to be application, it's down there somewhere. All right, here it is, handlebars template. So this is going to be a collection, so I am going to write the name of the collection which we are going to use, and this is going to be cart items. Let's also add the closing token, and now inside this opening and closing collection tokens we are going to provide the HTML template. So this is going to be enclosed inside a div. Let's provide a horizontal break. First we will provide the name of the book, so the name token, and then we can provide a line break to go to the next line. So I'm just going to copy and paste the rest of the items. So this is for the quantity and for the price, and the quantity and price tokens will be used to fetch their values. We will also have another token after this list has been iterated, adding or generating all of the individual cart items. There is one thing that we need to add over here, and that is the button to remove the existing cart item. So let's just do that. So button and then type equals to button, and let's provide the class as you know what, let's use btn and then btn danger for a red button, and then on click equals to, now we need to call a JavaScript function by providing this cart items id as an argument. So we will create that method or that function in a moment, but first let's just provide this on click attributes value. So JavaScript, and then let's just call the function as remove from cart, and we can provide the value of the id over here by using the id token. And let's just call the caption of the button as remove. We can provide another horizontal break over here, or horizontal line over here. So now our template for the cart items has been finished, and we also need to add another button to add the book to the shopping cart, and that can be done inside this book template. So I'm just going to copy the button from over here, and we will keep what we can and change what we need. So let's just change the danger to primary, and we need to add the book to the cart by calling the add to cart function, and this will accept three arguments: the id, the name, and also the price of the book. The price, and we need to change this caption to add to cart. Now let's provide the implementation details for the add to cart function and the remove from cart function. So first let's write the function async function and then add to cart. First let's create the argument list. So this is going to be the book id, the name, and the price, and then we can construct a new cart item object by using these argument values id, name, price, and quantity, which is similar to the book model, or I'm sorry, the cart item model which we created, the id, name, price, and quantity. After that we can use the fetch API to call the cart API controller. So let response equals to await and then fetch API and then cart, and now we need to provide a data object or an options object. Let's just call it data. So this options or data object is going to contain the method and the headers that we need to provide, and we will also need to provide this cart item as the stringified JSON string. So let's just create the data object. The method is post, the headers is content type application JSON, and the body is the stringified version or the JSON string equivalent of this cart item object, and then this data is being provided as an argument over here. We don't need to do anything with this response, so let's just keep it like this over here. And now let's create the function to remove the cart item from the session. So for that let's create another function. So async function, and let's just call it remove from cart, and the argument is going to be the book id. Let's also create the data object which we need to provide as an argument into the fetch method or the fetch function. So data is going to be an empty object with the method as delete. I'm sorry if you guys can't see it, I'm just going to scroll it in the middle. And let response equals to await fetch, and then we need to call API and then cart, and now we need to provide the book id along with the data with the method delete. Now these two methods have been done, but we also need a method to load or refresh the cart items whenever any change is made to them or whenever any new book is added to the cart items. For that, let's create a function and we can call it let's call it refresh cart items. This is not going to accept any arguments. Now we can utilize this getFetchObservable function to first get the RxJS observable, which will return the JSON returned from the server. So let's first fetch the reference of the cart items div, in which we are going to append the generated cart items list using the handlebars template. Let's also fetch the reference of the cart item handlebars template by using document.querySelector and then providing the ID of the cart item template script, which is this one. We need to compile the cart item source by calling handlebars.compile, and we can fetch the observable by simply creating a new object. So let observable equals to await get fetch observable, and then providing the URL, which is API and then cart. This time we will not be creating another observable for the returned array because we are using the array inside the template, so we don't really need to spit out or to return the individual cart items using observable. Let's just subscribe to this observable now. So observable dot subscribe, and data is the argument over here. So let's first calculate the total. So because total is not part of the entire data which is being returned from the server, so we need to provide this total separately. So let total equals to 0, and now for each of the cart item we are going to increment the total with the price. So for each of the data we will simply add into the total the cart items price, and then finally we can append into this div cart items the generated HTML from the cart items template. So we can directly set the HTML as, actually this is going to be a new element, so template, and then we can provide a new object as an argument, cart items, the cart items collection. This is the data, and also another property for the total token. So dollar, and then let's just concatenate the total with this one, and that should be pretty much it. And now we need to refresh the cart items whenever a new book has been added to the cart, and also whenever any book is deleted from the cart. Let's also refresh the cart item when the page loads for the first time. This can be done by calling this function in the load function, and that should be pretty much it. Now let's just run the code to check out if it is working or not. Alright, so the cart div is loading, and now let's try to add the book to a cart, and it is not actually adding, and it says missing parenthesis after argument list. So the issue over here is that we need to enclose this name in inverted commas because this is going to be a string. And now let's try again. So now let's click on add to cart again, and it says add to cart is not defined. Let's search for add to cart. Alright, so it looks like an issue with the case. Let's also search this remove from cart too. Alright, now let's refresh the page again. Click on add to cart. Now when I'm clicking on it, then the book has been added to the cart. Let's click on again on the add to cart button, and the quantity is increasing. Let's click on another book. The total is also updating. Let's click on remove, and the book is now removing. And with this, our small bookstore project has been finished. And this is how we can use all of the mentioned technologies to create a very simple application to list out the data in a very meaningful way. And with that, it's time to end this video. Thank you so much for watching it, and do let me know what you think about it. If you like this video, then please like it and also hit the subscribe button to be the first to know about the latest video updates. Use the comments area if you have any questions or if you want to say anything to me, and I will try to reply to you as soon as I can. Till we meet in the next video, have a great time.